The Green Party has a proud track record of advocating for people and planet. It is why we exist. Protecting our planet and caring for our people are core to who we are.
That might be the Greens' political vision, but recently that's been overshadowed by its internal politics.
Please resign. Green co-leader Chloe Swarbrick made an extraordinary public plea to embattled MP Darlene Tana today to resign from Parliament. Tana has agreed to resign from the Green Party. It follows an investigation into her involvement in alleged migrant exploitation at her husband's bike business.
40-something thousand hard-earned money has been wasted on an investigation which has ultimately found that I'm married to my husband.
Look, no apologies, no backdowns from anyone in this today.
And it's not just that, there's been months of drama.
Former Green MP Golraz Garaman has been convicted and fined on shoplifting charges.
Embattled MP Julianne Gent has admitted she needs help in de-escalating heated situations in an exclusive interview with One News. It's the first time she's spoken publicly since a confrontation at Parliament.
Now let's get straight into some breaking news. Green Party co-leader James Shaw has just announced his resignation.
And then, of course, tragedy.
Very sad news. The Green MP Efessel Collins has died, RNZ understands, after taking part in a charity event in central Auckland this morning.
Green co-leader Marama Davidson has revealed she's been diagnosed with breast cancer and will go on leave at the end of the month to undergo treatment, including a partial mastectomy.
Kia ora, I'm Tom Kitchen, and today on The Detail, what is going on with the Greens? Laura Walters, New Zealand's political editor. Kia ora, welcome to The Detail today.
Kia ora, thank you for having me.
Hey, really good to have you along with us today. Today we are talking about the tumultuous year the Greens have had, right? There's been a lot going on. Probably the best place to start is what's happened recently, right? So the big headlines that have been hitting the news over the last week, it's all about Darlene Tana, right?
Absolutely.
So we just have a bit of a discussion about where that all started first off, right?
Yeah, so earlier this year, there was some reporting, initially by Stuff, around allegations to do with migrant exploitation or alleged migrant exploitation at the business that Darlene Tana's husband runs and that she is involved with. The degree to which she's involved with the business is part of what has been, up for questioning and under investigation. But, she is linked to that business. This is an e-cycle business up in Auckland, and there were these allegations coming out from workers that were coming out via the media around the types of visas, whether people were getting what they were owed in terms of pay and things like that. So the reporting kind of started there, and I understand that the Green Party knew about these allegations was in February, and Darlene Tana, it's probably worth mentioning, is a first-term List MP, and she is, part of their Māori caucus, and, they were obviously expecting big, bright things for her coming in as this, this class of 2023. And then these allegations dropped at the start of the year. And so what the Greens did at that point was remove her small business portfolio from her. And then within a month, so in early to mid-March, the Greens had kind of further information. There were further allegations that were coming out in the press. And at that point, under the new leadership or the new co-leadership, I should say, of Chloe Swarbrick and Marama Davidson, the Greens stood Darlene Tana down from Parliament.
The Green Party has suspended one of its MPs, Darlene Tana, after she was linked to alleged migrant exploitation by her husband's company.
They put her essentially on leave with pay. That has been discussed a lot as well, on leave with full pay, while they launched an independent investigation, not into the substantive migrant exploitation allegations or claims, but into what Darlene Tana knew, when she knew it, how much connection and knowledge she had of the business or to the business there, and essentially what she told the party, whether she was upfront with the party, while they were kind of working through these allegations. We're now quite a few months later, and it's all exploded in this past week.
So what's happened is the report has been finished now, right? And the Green Party has a copy of that report, And Chloe Swarbrick came out last week swinging, didn't she?
It is crystal clear to myself and Marama that Darlene Tana's behaviour falls far short of our expectations of any Member of Parliament.
She did. So, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of criticism, over these past few months. Where's Darlene Tana? Where's this report? Why haven't we heard anything? What are the Greens doing? Is this a good use of public money? And it just kind of went on and on and on. And then all of a sudden, bam, last Monday, we had Chloe Swarbrick entered the Grand Hall in Parliament, and she was backed by Ricardo Menendez-March and Tiano Tuiono, and they stood up there in front of everyone and just uncategorically said that Darlene Tana's behaviour was not okay, and that she was now out of the party. So to rewind a little bit, ahead of that press conference, the Green Party had received the report from the independent investigator, lawyer Rachel Burt, late on the Friday evening, about 9:30 p.m. From there, they went through the report. They got in touch with Darlene Tana, who had an advanced draft version of the report, which then she could obviously feed back to. They got in touch with her. They said, look, we're calling an emergency caucus meeting. We would like to have you there to kind of put your case to us. She showed up. She was there with a lawyer and another support person. And they kind of said, look, this is what we think based on the summary. We think that your actions fall far short of what we would expect from a Green Party MP. And then she came off the call while the caucus kind of continued their discussions, and then she emailed them and said that she would be resigning from the Green Party. So essentially jumped just a minute before she could be booted from the party. Of course, then the next question became whether she would be leaving Parliament. So the caucus unanimously voted on the kind of the advice, I guess, or the recommendation from Swarbrick and Davidson that she should resign from Parliament, that they would like to see her do that.
So they're waiting to release the executive summary of this report, right? But some of it's already been leaked to some journalists?
Oh yes, we love a politics leak, don't we?
Do you?
It is hard to keep these things secret. Some of the things in that executive summary spoke about why the investigation took so long. Those full 3 months. It talked about the broadened scope, the late arrival of extensive evidence from some of those migrant workers, and the quote lengthy and often unclear evidence from Tana and her husband. So that kind of spoke to what the Greens have talked about a lot as well, where they feel like Tana hasn't been proactive or upfront with them throughout this whole affair. And that was really backed up by what we've seen so far from this leaked executive summary. Now, I should say at this point that Tana hasn't been really responding to requests for comment. So a lot of what we're getting is just from the Greens side at this stage. She did provide kind of a short emailed statement, and she doesn't have kind of comm staff working around her at the moment, so it was just fired off to kind of a random selection of email addresses and media. But essentially what she said is she does not accept the findings of the report. She also doesn't accept the Greens' position on it or their summary of the findings. She believes that it substantially misrepresents her level of involvement in her husband's business, and she also notes that this investigation wasn't about whether migrant exploitation occurred. It was about, what she knew and when she knew it. So the, inference that some people are drawing that she was somehow involved in migrant exploitation, she says, is not true. And she also says after that she wants to take some more time to consider the report before she makes any further comment.
Last night, Darlene finally spoke to Mikey Sherman from One News.
The easiest thing may well be to step away. But either way, that's a decision that requires quite some consideration.
So the Greens could technically kick her out of Parliament, right, using the waka jumping law that was introduced under the Labour New Zealand First government in 2018. But they historically haven't liked that waka jumping rule.
Yes, the waka jumping rule, for people who are not familiar with it, I mean, it's also known by its far less catchy title of the Electoral Integrity Amendment Act.
Okay.
Yeah, or as the Greens like to call it, the party hopping bill. They don't really like it being referred to as waka jumping. They think that it makes kind of light of the situation, essentially. But because that is how it is commonly known, let's refer to it as the waka jumping bill. So yeah, as you mentioned, it was passed in September 2018 as part of the New Zealand First Labour coalition, which the Green Party was in a confidence and supply agreement with that coalition. So essentially, this law would allow the party to, with the backing of 2/3 of its caucus there, to write to the Speaker of the House and say that her presence, her remaining in Parliament, distorts the proportionality of party representation in Parliament. Essentially, this is not the makeup of Parliament that New Zealand voted for. Therefore, she should be out. She's no longer part of our party. Rather than her sitting either as an independent or joining another political party, which, she could potentially do, we think that she should be out of Parliament and kind of draw a line under it, and then in that situation they would be able to bring in the next person on their Green Party list. Now, it all becomes complicated, as you said, because the Green Party has always been really opposed to this legislation. So at the time when it was passed in 2018, James Shaw said that they were being forced, or the Greens were being forced, to swallow a dead rat by supporting this legislation. They really didn't want to do it, but it's what they signed up for as part of that governing arrangement at the time. But the history of this law goes kind of way back as well. A similar law was passed in 2001, it expired in 2005, hence the new law that was introduced in 2018. And at the time that it was kind of first introduced in the early 2000s, it was described by the founding co-leader of the Green Party, Rod Donald, as, quote, the most draconian, obnoxious, anti-democratic, insulting piece of legislation ever inflicted on this Parliament.
Okay.
It is vital that MPs aren't turned into party robots. Anti-defection legislation is designed to gag outspoken MPs and crush dissent, which is why in Germany, the home of MMP and the country which suffered Hitler's reign of terror, they do not have an anti-defection legislation.
So they have strong opposition to this law going way back. Their issue with it is that they say it stops people from being able to essentially speak out against their party. The fact that someone wouldn't be able to take a principled stance against their broader party for fear of being kicked out of Parliament altogether, to them they feel is very anti-democratic or very undemocratic. They think that, we already have one of the most whipped parliaments in the world, where most of the time the whole caucus has to vote along party lines. We see very few of those conscience votes, and it's really important for MPs to be able to stand up and, maybe push against a party line, make sure that they're, properly representing the views of their electorate, even if it doesn't, again, fall in line with what their broader party thinks. So the Greens have always been opposed to it. They've called it a dead rat. They've called it anti-democratic. Will they use it in this case?
What do you think?
Is the big question. It's incredibly hard to know. I mean, on the one hand, this whole saga with Darlene Tana, Chloe Swarbrick has been talking about principles and values and how important those are, and how Darlene has, in her view, fallen short of those. So what, do they then go against their principles and values and use this law? They'll be desperately hoping that they don't need to. They'll be really hoping that Darlene Tana decides to resign from Parliament on her own, and they'll be wanting that to kind of happen sooner rather than later. We're in recess at the moment, but when the House comes back and is sitting from, next week, having her in there makes things a little bit difficult and a little bit complicated. So I've seen people writing kind of, the commentariat, if you will, writing on both sides of this. Some people are saying there's no way the Greens will go against those principles and values and their opposition to the waka jumping legislation. And others are saying that, You know, the legislation is for people to be able to stand apart from their party and take a principled stance. It's not when someone's conduct has fallen short of what you'd expect from an MP. So it's kind of a different situation or different grounds in this situation as to why they had opposed it. So they might be able to actually use the legislation and boot her out. There are a couple of ways that this could play out. You know, they only need the caucus support. They don't need to go to membership, but the Greens are holding their AGM at the end of this month in Christchurch, so they could then go to their broader party membership as part of, you know, their AGM and ask them if they support them using the waka jumping legislation. If they get broad support, you know, that kind of 75% or plus, we have seen people be booted from or defected from parties recently. You know, we've seen, you know, the likes of Jamie Lee Ross and Meka Whaitiri, and saw Elizabeth Kirikiri. But there are some differences with those, especially with Whaitiri and Kirikiri. You know, those issues happen near the end of the parliamentary term. With Darlene Tana, we're very early on in the term, so for her to sit in Parliament for, you know, another 2+ years as an independent, you know, how helpful is that for her, for the Green Party, for New Zealand more broadly? Is she really going to be doing good mahi on behalf of her broader electorate? Probably not.
Okay, well, it'll be interesting to see what plays out. It's certainly not the only issue to hit the Greens in the last year and a bit, right? We've had many personnel issues, some of them quite sad, though. Do you want to take me through what battles the Greens have had to play out with some of the MPs this year?
Yeah, brace yourself, Tom, because there are a few of them coming at you. So it's hard to know how far back to go with this, but I would kind of start it by just mentioning in 2022 there was a bit of a shot across the bow at James Shaw, you know, the former co-leader of the Green Party, where he was temporarily ousted from the leadership by his party membership.
A third of voting members chose to reopen nominations rather than reselect James Shaw as co-leader. And Shaw is yet to declare whether he'll stand for the role. So will he or won't he?
Of course he came back in, but that kind of showed that there were some kind of ructions, that there was a bit of discontent within the broader Green Party membership. So that kind of, in my view, set things kind of running here when we're looking at, you know, this whole lineup of issues that the Greens have faced in recent years. Then, of course, less than a year later, we had the issues with Elizabeth Kirikiri and the bullying claims there, the bullying allegations.
Green Party MP Elizabeth Kirikiri is in hot water after apparently calling her colleague Chloe Swarbrick a crybaby in a text sent in error.
She strenuously denied them the entire time.
There was an investigation, but that was dropped when she resigned from the party, is that right?
That is correct. Hot on the heels of that, we've had the shoplifting issues with Golriz Garaman. We recently saw that play out as a criminal court case where Garaman was convicted of shoplifting, and since then she's, quite a different approach to Darlene Tana. She's been very open with media, talking about her experience and kind of what went on there with her.
That's mostly mental health issues, right?
Exactly. So Golriz has spoken about her mental health and her diagnosis of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. There's links with that to her early life, I guess, as someone who was a refugee, but then also relating to her time as an MP.
We all know that racism exists and prejudice exists, but the sheer volume of it and the level of violence in it was not something that I expected.
Next up is Julianne Genter, who of course is a very senior member of the caucus. She's held ministerial portfolios in the past, but this year we've seen some conduct issues from her. We saw her in the House walk over to Matt Ducey, a National Party MP, stand over him, yell at him, wave a piece of paper in his face.
Ms. Genter, please resume your seat.
Subsequently, we heard from a member of the public that Julie-Anne Genter had actually shouted at her, grabbed her. There's, again, kind of an investigation that has ensued following all of that behaviour, and that has been carried out by Parliament's Privileges Committee, which is still ongoing at the moment. And we would expect to hear something once the House comes back, once the House resumes and is sitting again, to find out what is going to happen with Julie-Anne Genter there.
And then we've got a bit of a sadder kind of frame of things.
Yeah, so to kind of add to all of these stresses, I guess, that the party is facing at the moment, we've had a couple of real tragic events that have hit the Green Party, and it's just worth mentioning that these do sit very separately to the conduct issues. But in February, we had the death of Fa'anana Efeso Collins. So Collins was at a charity event in February. He collapsed and he subsequently passed away. Again, a new MP, big bright future ahead of him. He was really well liked and respected, not just within the Green Party, but kind of across Parliament. And then just recently, just in June, we heard that co-leader Marama Davidson has been diagnosed with breast cancer, and she is currently on medical leave while she is undergoing treatment for that. So she fully intends to come back and remain as part of the party, but at the moment she is on leave.
Yeah, it sounds like a horrendously tough year for the party. Where can we put all these issues, and how can we kind of pick out what's happening with the Greens?
It's really, really difficult to kind of pull these out and separate all these issues. And on the one hand, we've got these conduct issues that are all separate and are all individual, but are all, a really bad look for the Greens, essentially. And it, raises very valid questions around things like their vetting process, their support processes, whether the party is kind of operating in a fully professionalised way as it needs to, and just the people, the candidates that they're picking and how they're vetting them, essentially. Just to give you a little bit of a flavour about what that involves, a candidate needs to be nominated by 5 members of the Green Party who would be willing to act as a referee for them. Then they fill out a declaration and put in a CV, things like that. And then they kind of go through a layer of kind of interviews and vibe checks, essentially. If they are a Māori candidate, Te Ropo Punamu, which is the Green Party's Māori membership group, must also consider them. But there's a lot of discretion during this vetting process. There's not the hardcore kind of opposition research style vetting that the National Party does, for example. There's no police background checks or anything like that.
Oh.
Yeah. And that's the case for some other parties as well. Like, my understanding is Labour doesn't do a police background check. So a lot is left up to trust and discretion. It's up to talking to the right people. It's up to the candidates to, I guess, be forthcoming with information. And when they haven't, then, the party is kind of left open to the possibility that something like we've seen happen with Darlene Tana could happen again. So it's really worthwhile them looking at those vetting processes, tightening them up, also tightening up their candidate selection.
It's not that easy being green.
It's no longer just a small party anymore. They're not getting a few MPs into Parliament. This is kind of the biggest of the small parties, essentially.
It is,
And their vote, but if we're looking at the polls, is probably only going to grow into the future. So it's really important that they have high quality, well vetted, able candidates coming through so that they don't constantly be hit with these issues.
I'm green and it'll do fine and it's beautiful and I think it's what I want to be.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and NZ On Air. This episode was engineered by Jeremy Ansell. It was produced by Gwen McClure, Davina Zimmer and Alexia Russell. Thanks to Laura Walters. I'm Tom Kitchen. Mā te wā.